My secret with the CEO was hidden for 11 weeks, until one photo fell and destroyed the illusion of everything we pretended to be. The ultrasound image fluttered to the polished marble floor like a delicate leaf caught in an autumn breeze. For a moment, Malene Harris froze, her breath caught in her throat as she watched the black and white photo slide across the floor, coming to rest at the exquisitely polished Oxford shoes of Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Innovations. Time seemed to slow as his piercing blue eyes shifted from the quarterly report in his hand to the small image at his feet. "I believe you dropped something, Miss Harris," he said, his deep voice carrying across the now silent executive floor. Before Malene could move, Richard bent down, his 6'3" frame folding gracefully as he retrieved the ultrasound photo. His expression remained neutral as he extended it toward her, but something flickered in his eyes as they caught the date printed in the corner. April 15th, 2025. Exactly 11 weeks after their encounter at the Bellamy Hotel Charity Gala. Malene's fingers trembled slightly as she took the photo, hoping he hadn't made the connection. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," she managed, slipping the image into her leather portfolio. "The quarterly projections are ready for your review. I've highlighted the areas showing the most growth potential." Richard's face revealed nothing as he accepted the report she offered, but the intensity of his gaze told her everything. He knew, or at least he suspected. "Join me in my office, Miss Harris," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. 7 weeks into her position as a financial analyst at Bennett Innovations, Malene had carefully avoided one-on-one meetings with the CEO. The company employed over 300 people across 3 floors of the downtown high-rise, making it relatively easy to keep her distance from the executive suite. Until today, as she followed Richard into his corner office, Malene's mind raced back to that night in January. The charity gala had been a glittering affair at the Bellamy, with champagne flowing freely and the city's elite mingling under crystal chandeliers. She'd attended as a +1 with her roommate Jessica, whose family had connections with the organizers. Richard Bennett had been there alone, having recently ended a highly publicized relationship with a French model. Their eyes had met across the ballroom, and something electric had passed between them. They'd talked for hours, first about the charity's work supporting children's education, then about everything else: art, travel, their shared love of classical music. He hadn't mentioned his company, and she, recently laid off from her previous position, hadn't mentioned her job search. They were just 2 people connecting on a rare magical level. One night, that was all it was supposed to be, a beautiful memory before returning to real life. 3 weeks later, she'd received the call about an opening at Bennett Innovations. She'd been torn. The position was perfect, exactly what she'd been looking for, with an excellent salary and growth potential, but accepting meant potentially running into Richard. After much deliberation, she'd convinced herself that in a company that size, their paths would rarely cross. The CEO wouldn't remember one night with a woman whose last name he probably hadn't even registered. Then, 2 weeks after starting her new job, she'd missed her period. The pregnancy test had confirmed what she'd already suspected, and the ultrasound appointment had made it real. 12 weeks pregnant, carrying Richard Bennett's child. Now, as Richard closed his office door behind them, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline, Malene felt cornered. The spacious office suddenly seemed too small, the air too thin. "Please sit." Richard gestured to one of the sleek leather chairs facing his desk. He didn't take his usual seat behind the imposing glass desk, but instead chose the chair beside hers, turning it to face her directly, with no barriers between them. "I've been impressed with your work, Ms. Harris," he began, his voice carefully measured. "Your financial analyses have been insightful, creative even. The board was particularly pleased with your presentation last week." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," Malene replied, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. Was he going to pretend he hadn't seen the date, or was he building up to something else? "However," he continued, leaning forward slightly, "I find myself curious about something." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her heart race. "When exactly did you apply for this position?" The question caught her off guard. "February 7th, I believe. The interview process took about 2 weeks. Richard nodded slowly. "And prior to that, you were with Westfield Financial for 3 years. "Yes. There were layoffs after the merger." "I see." His eyes never left hers. "And the Bellamy Hotel Charity Gala was on January 22nd. The air seemed to vanish from the room. He remembered, not just the night, but the exact date. You recognized me on your first day, he continued, not a question but a statement. Yet you said nothing. Malene swallowed hard. It didn't seem professional to mention it. Professional, he repeated, the word hanging between them. And the ultrasound I just picked up off the floor, the one dated April 15th showing what appears to be a 12-week pregnancy. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. Is professionalism also why you chose not to mention that? Malene felt heat rising to her cheeks, her carefully constructed world teetering on the brink of collapse. Mr. Bennett, Richard, he corrected, his expression softening slightly. I think we're well past formalities, Malene. The sound of her first name on his lips brought back vivid memories of that night. Whispered conversations, gentle touches, the way he'd looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. Richard, she began again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. Outside the window, dark clouds were gathering, mirroring the storm brewing within the office. A light rain began to tap against the glass, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the tension filling the space between them. Were you ever going to tell me? He asked, and for the first time, she heard something vulnerable in his voice. Or was I never supposed to know about my own child? I don't know, Malene admitted, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. I've been trying to figure out what to do since I found out. Richard ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that made him look suddenly vulnerable, less like the formidable CEO whose face graced business magazines and more like the man she'd connected with that night at the Bellamy. So it is mine, he said quietly, though they both knew the answer. Malene nodded, her throat tight. Yes, there's been no one else. A heavy silence filled the office, broken only by the increasing rhythm of raindrops against the window. The city skyline, usually so vivid from this height, was now obscured by sheets of rain, isolating them in their own world high above the streets. I should have told you, she finally said. But everything happened so fast. I didn't know I was pregnant when I accepted the position here, and then when I found out. She trailed off, looking down at her hands. You're Richard Bennett. Your last 3 girlfriends were models and actresses. Your company is expanding into international markets. Your life is complicated enough without my child, he interrupted, his voice sharper than she'd heard it before. Did it occur to you that I might have wanted to know, that I might have had something to say about it? Malene felt a flicker of defiance. And what would you have said, Richard? Congratulations on the surprise pregnancy from our one-night stand. Let me set you up with the best lawyers for a generous child support arrangement? Or perhaps, how unfortunate that this happened, but best of luck. Richard stood abruptly, pacing to the window. He stood there for a long moment, his back to her, shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. When he finally turned, his expression was carefully controlled. You're right, he said, surprising her. I don't know what I would have said, but I deserve the chance to figure it out. Thunder rumbled outside, and Malene felt the vibration in her chest. Or perhaps that was just her heart pounding with the weight of secrets finally exposed. Tell me about the appointment, Richard said, his tone gentler now. Is the baby healthy? The simple question, so full of genuine concern, threatened to undo her completely. Yes, she managed, blinking back sudden tears. Everything looks normal, strong heartbeat. The doctor says I'm doing well. Richard nodded, his relief visible. He returned to sit across from her, closer this time. I want to be involved, Malene. I need you to understand that whatever assumptions you've made about me or my reaction, they're wrong. It's not that simple, she countered. We barely know each other. One night, no matter how wonderful, doesn't make a relationship, and now I work for you. Do you have any idea how complicated this is? Of course I do, he responded, frustration edging his voice. But that doesn't change the facts. In 7 months there will be a child. My child. Our child. He leaned forward. And despite what the tabloids might suggest, I take my responsibilities seriously. Malene studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity and finding none. Richard Bennett might be many things, driven, intimidating, occasionally ruthless in business, but in this moment, he was simply a man confronting unexpected news with more composure than most would manage. I have a doctor's appointment next week, she offered tentatively. They'll do another ultrasound. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, perhaps. I'd like to be there, if you'll allow it. Before she could respond, his office phone buzzed. Richard ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent. Mr. Bennett, his assistant's voice came through the speaker. The Nakamura delegation has arrived early. They're waiting in the conference room. Richard closed his eyes briefly, the outside world intruding on their fragile moment of understanding. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, Diane." He turned back to Malene, his gaze intense, almost pleading. "I have to handle this. It's the Tokyo expansion. We've been working on it for months, but this conversation isn't over. Have dinner with me tonight, not as your boss but as the father of your child. We need to talk about where we go from here." Malene hesitated, years of careful self-protection warring with the undeniable pull she still felt toward him. "All right," she finally agreed. "Dinner." Relief washed over his features. "I'll have my driver pick you up at 7 o'clock. We'll go somewhere private." As she gathered her portfolio to leave, Richard reached out, his fingers lightly touching her arm. The contact sent a jolt through her, reminding her body of everything her mind had been trying to forget. "Thank you," he said simply, "for agreeing to talk. And Malene, regardless of how this happened, I want you to know, a child isn't unwelcome news to me." 7 hours later, Malene stood in front of her closet in her modest apartment, discarding outfit after outfit. Nothing seemed right for dinner with the father of her unborn child, who also happened to be her boss, after a revelation that had upended both their lives. "You're overthinking this," Jessica said from the doorway, watching her roommate's growing pile of rejected clothes. "The man has seen you naked. I don't think he's going to care if you wear the blue dress or the black one." "Jess," Malene groaned, throwing a balled-up sweater in her friend's direction. "Not helping." Jessica caught the sweater with a laugh. "Sorry, but someone needs to lighten the mood. You look like you're preparing for an execution, not dinner." Her expression softened. How did he really take it? The pregnancy? Malene sank onto the edge of her bed. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "He was upset I didn't tell him sooner, but he wasn't angry about the baby itself. He said he wants to be involved." "And that surprises you?" "I don't know him, Jess. Not really. One night and a handful of professional interactions. Don't tell me who Richard Bennett really is when the cameras aren't watching." Jessica sat beside her. "Well, the tabloids say he dated a French model who's actually Canadian, that he owns a private island he's never been to, and that he once punched a competitor at a charity event when they actually just shook hands rather firmly." Malene interrupted. "I don't think they're reliable sources." "Fair point," Jessica conceded. "But tonight's your chance to actually get to know him. The real him, not the CEO or the one-night stand. The potential father of your child." She picked up a simple emerald dress from the discarded pile. "Wear this one. It brings out your eyes and works with your pregnancy. Nothing too sexy, nothing too formal, just you." Malene took the dress, gratitude flooding her features. "What would I do without you?" "Probably show up in sweatpants or a ball gown with nothing in between," Jessica teased, standing. "Now get dressed. Your baby daddy's car will be here in 20 minutes. "Don't call him that," Malene protested, but there was a hint of a smile on her face for the first time that day. As predicted, the sleek black car arrived precisely at 7 o'clock. The driver, a polite older man who introduced himself as Thomas, held the door for her with a respectful nod. "Mr. Bennett is finishing a call, and will meet you at the restaurant, Ms. Harris," he explained, as they pulled away from her apartment building. "He asked me to apologize for not picking you up personally." Malene nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of disappointment. Of course, Richard would be working late. He ran a multinational corporation. She had no right to expect him to drop everything because of their situation. As the car wound through the city streets, she placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of the evening ahead. This wasn't just dinner. This was the beginning of negotiations that would shape the rest of her life and her child's. The restaurant wasn't what Malene expected. Instead of one of the city's exclusive fine dining establishments, where reservations were made months in advance, Thomas drove to a renovated Victorian house on a quiet, tree-lined street in the historic district. A discreet brass plaque beside the door read, "Charlotte's." "Mr. Bennett owns this place," Thomas explained, as he opened her door. "It's not open to the public. He uses it for private meetings and special occasions." The interior was warm and elegant. Polished hardwood floors, soft lighting from antique fixtures, and a crackling fireplace in what had once been the home's living room. No other guests were present, just a single table set for two near the fireplace, and an older woman who greeted her with a warm smile. "Miss Harris, welcome. I'm Charlotte," she said, taking Malene's coat. "Mr. Bennett is waiting for you in the library. Please follow me." Malene followed Charlotte through the main dining room to a smaller room lined with bookshelves. Richard stood when she entered, setting aside what looked like a worn photo album. He had changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that softened his usually imposing presence. "You look beautiful," he said simply, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for coming." Charlotte discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone in the intimate space. A bottle of sparkling water chilled in an ice bucket beside the table. "This place is lovely," Malene said, glancing around at the well-stocked bookshelves. "Thomas said you own it?" Richard nodded, pouring water for both of them. "It was my grandmother's house. After she passed, I couldn't bear to sell it, but it was sitting empty. Charlotte was her housekeeper for 30 years. She suggested turning it into a private dining venue." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "She still won't let me call her anything but Charlotte, despite technically being my employee for the past decade." The personal story surprised Malene. It wasn't the kind of detail that appeared in his company bio or press profiles. "You were close to your grandmother," she observed. "She raised me after my parents died," he replied, a shadow crossing his face. "Car accident when I was 8. My grandmother was the only family I had left." Malene hadn't known this. The business magazines portrayed Richard Bennett as a self-made success story who built his tech company from the ground up, but they rarely mentioned his personal history. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know about your parents. It's not something I talk about often," he admitted, "but it seems relevant now given our situation." He hesitated, then added, "My grandmother taught me that family is precious, irreplaceable. That's why today, when I saw that ultrasound," he trailed off, emotion briefly overtaking his usual composure. Their conversation paused as Charlotte returned with the first course, a delicate soup that Malene recognized as homemade chicken noodle, comfort food elevated to gourmet status. "Your grandmother's recipe," she guessed after Charlotte left again. Richard looked surprised, then pleased. "Yes, how did you know?" "Just a feeling. It's too personal to be a chef's creation." They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Richard spoke again. "I want to know what you're thinking, Malene, about the pregnancy, about us, about how you want to proceed." Malene set her spoon down carefully. "I want to keep the baby," she said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "I've known that from the moment I saw the first ultrasound. What I don't know is how to navigate everything else." She met his gaze directly. "I'm not looking for anything from you that you don't want to give, but I won't lie and say I'm not worried about my job, my reputation, my future at the company." "Your job is secure," Richard said immediately, "regardless of our personal situation." "Is it?" Malene challenged. "You know as well as I do how quickly rumors spread. Once people find out I'm pregnant with the CEO's child, no one will believe I earned my position. Everything I've worked for will be questioned." Richard frowned. "We can be discreet." "For how long?" she interrupted. "Eventually, I'll show. Eventually, people will do the math." "And what then? Will the board be comfortable with this situation? Will our clients?" Before Richard could respond, Charlotte arrived with their main course, perfectly prepared filet mignon for him, and herb-roasted chicken for her. As she arranged their plates, Malene noticed Charlotte's eyes briefly flickering to her still flat stomach, then to Richard with a knowing look that held no judgment, only affection. When they were alone again, Richard leaned forward. "I want to show you something," he said, reaching for the photo album he'd set aside earlier. He opened it to a marked page and turned it toward her. The photograph showed a much younger Richard, perhaps 16 or 17, standing beside a pretty blonde girl about the same age. They were both smiling, his arm around her shoulders protectively. "That's Amelia," he said quietly, "my high school girlfriend. We were together for 3 years." Malene studied the photo, noting the genuine happiness in both their faces. "She's lovely. What happened between you?" Richard turned the page. The next photo showed the same girl, now visibly pregnant, still smiling but with shadows under her eyes. Richard stood beside her, looking simultaneously terrified and proud. "She got pregnant our senior year," he said, his voice low. "We were 17, terrified. But we decided to keep the baby, get married after graduation." Malene's breath caught. "You have a child?" The realization that she knew so little about this man, the father of her unborn baby, hit her with full force. "No," Richard said, the single word heavy with old grief. Amelia had complications in her 7th month. Preeclampsia that wasn't caught in time. His voice broke slightly. "She died. The baby too. A little boy." Malene's hand instinctively covered his on the table. "Richard, I'm so sorry." He turned the page again, showing a funeral program. "My grandmother was my rock through all of it. She taught me that grief doesn't diminish with time. You just build your life around it." He closed the album gently. So, when I tell you that I want to be involved in our child's life, it's not just words, Malene. It's not just obligation. I've known loss. I don't take family lightly. Brewery. The revelation shifted everything. The man sitting across from her wasn't the playboy CEO the media portrayed, collecting beautiful women like trophies. He was someone who had faced devastating loss and built himself anyway, carrying invisible scars beneath his successful exterior. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "Because I want you to understand why your pregnancy, why our child matters so much to me." He looked at her intently. "And because I need you to know who I really am, not what the press says about me, if we're going to figure this out together." The main course forgotten, Malene felt tears threatening. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself, but knew it was more than that. "I didn't expect this," she admitted. "Any of it. You're not who I thought you were." "Is that good or bad?" he asked, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "I'm not sure yet," she answered honestly. "But I'd like to find out." The moment was interrupted by Charlotte, who appeared with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Bennett, but there's an urgent call from Tokyo. Mr. Nakamura insists it can't wait." Richard sighed, clearly torn. "I need to take this. The merger depends on it. Will you excuse me for a few minutes?" Malene nodded, watching as he followed Charlotte to what must have been an office. Alone, she wandered to the bookshelves, examining the titles, classics, history, science, a collection built over generations. Her fingers trailed across the spines until they reached a section of children's books, well-worn and clearly treasured. One book was pulled slightly forward from the others, "Goodnight Moon." Malene slipped it from the shelf, opening to find an inscription, "To Richard, with all my love. Dream big, little one, grandmother." She was replacing the book when she noticed a framed news article partially hidden behind other volumes. Curious, she moved them aside to reveal a 20-year-old newspaper clipping about the Bennett family tragedy. The headline read, "Local family devastated, prominent businessman Jonathan Bennett and wife Catherine die in crash. Son survives." But it was the smaller headline below that made her blood run cold. "Bennett Pharmaceuticals CEO leaves empire to 8-year-old son." Brooke of Bennett Pharmaceuticals, not Bennett Innovations. Malene's mind raced, connecting dots she should have seen before. Bennett Pharmaceuticals had been one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country before its sudden collapse 15 years ago. There had been scandals, a recalled medication, allegations of falsified research data, class action lawsuits from families of patients who had died. And the CEO at the center of it all had been Jonathan Bennett, Richard's father. She quickly returned the frame to its hiding place as she heard footsteps approaching, her heart pounding. Richard entered, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry about that," he began, but stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" Malene took a deep breath. "Your father was Jonathan Bennett of Bennett Pharmaceuticals," she said, not a question but a statement. Richard went completely still, his expression shuddering. "You've been researching me." "No," she gestured to the bookshelf. "I saw the article. It was an accident." His jaw tightened. "And now you have questions." "Just one," she said quietly. "Why did you hide it?" "Your company biography says you built Bennett Innovations from nothing. There's no mention of your father's company or your inheritance." "Because I did build it from nothing," he replied, his voice hard. "When my father's company collapsed after the scandals, there was nothing left. The lawsuits took everything. The company, our family's assets, even this house. My grandmother had to buy it back at auction with her savings." His eyes blazed with an old anger. "I changed my name legally when I turned 18, went to college on scholarships. Started Bennett Innovations with a loan and idea. I didn't hide my past, Malene. I overcame it." The intensity of his response left her momentarily speechless. This was yet another layer to the man she thought she knew. From charming stranger, to powerful CEO, to grieving young father, to a son still carrying the weight of his family's disgrace. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, running a hand through his hair. "You have every right to know who the father of your child is, even the parts I don't like to remember." His eyes met hers, searching. "Does it change things for you? Knowing this?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither had fully considered until this moment. "No," Malene said after a long moment. "It doesn't change how I feel. If anything, it helps me understand you better." Relief washed over Richard's features. "Thank you," he said simply. Charlotte returned with dessert, Warm apple crumble with vanilla ice cream, her timing impeccable as always. The homey, comforting dish helped ease the tension that had built between them. "My grandmother's specialty," Richard said with a small smile as Charlotte withdrew again. She believed there were a few problems in life that couldn't be improved by a good dessert. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Malene observed. She was. Richard's expression softened with memory. She would have been thrilled about this baby. She always wanted me to have a family of my own. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Malene set down her spoon. "So, where do we go from here, Richard, practically speaking?" He considered the question carefully. "I'd like us to get to know each other better," he said finally. "Not as boss and employee, not as two people who shared one night, but as two adults who are going to be parents together, regardless of what else we might become to each other. And at work," she pressed, "I've worked too hard to be seen as just the woman who's having the CEO's baby." Richard nodded, acknowledging her concern. "I have a proposition. Westfield Financial has been after me to bring you back since they realized what an asset they lost in those layoffs. Their CEO called me personally last month asking if I'd release you from your contract." Malene blinked in surprise. "Jack Westfield called you? About me?" "He did. Apparently the merger reorganization was more chaotic than they anticipated, and they regret letting you go. They're offering a director position, higher than what you had before, higher than your current position with us, and you're telling me this now because it might be a solution," Richard said. "You'd have a clear advancement that has nothing to do with our personal situation. No one could claim favoritism or impropriety, and professionally, it would be a significant step up." Malene felt a complex mix of emotions, appreciation for his thoughtfulness, pride at the recognition of her work, but also a strange disappointment at the thought of leaving Bennett Innovations, leaving Richard's daily orbit, just as they were beginning to truly know each other. "Would we still," she began, then hesitated. "Still see each other?" "Absolutely," he finished for her. "This would be about protecting your professional reputation, not pushing you away." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "In fact, I was hoping we might consider dating properly this time, getting to know each other as we prepare for this child." The proposal hung in the air between them, unexpected yet somehow exactly right. "Dating," Malene repeated, testing the word. "Like dinner and movies and getting to know each other's favorite colors?" Richard's lips quirked into a smile. "Something like that. Though I already know your favorite color is green." She raised an eyebrow. "How could you possibly know that?" "The charity gala," he explained. "You said the emerald necklace the museum director was wearing caught your eye because green was your favorite color." His eyes sparkled. "I pay attention, Malene." The fact that he remembered such a small detail from their one night together months ago made something warm unfurl in her chest. "Mine's a bit more complicated than remembering your favorite color is blue," she admitted. Richard looked genuinely puzzled. "My favorite color isn't blue. But your ties, your office, even your company logo, everything is blue." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "That's marketing, not preference. My favorite color is actually orange, bright sunrise orange." His expression grew nostalgic. "My mother used to paint, mostly sunrises. I guess it stuck with me." This small, intimate revelation, something no business profile or magazine interview had ever uncovered, felt like a gift, a piece of the real Richard Bennett that few people ever saw. "Orange," she repeated with a smile. "I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. See, we have a lot to learn about each other." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm not asking for promises, Malene, just a chance, for both of us, for our child." Before she could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over slightly. "Malene!" Richard was instantly alert, concern etching his features. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," she managed as another cramp seized her. "Something's not right." Richard was on his feet immediately, calling for Charlotte while pulling out his phone. "I'm calling my doctor. He'll meet us at the hospital." The next hour passed in a blur of anxiety. Richard's private doctor, a kind-faced man named Dr. Mitchell, met them at the hospital's private entrance. Malene was whisked to an examination room, fear clutching at her heart as she remembered Richard's story about Amelia. Richard refused to leave her side, his normally commanding presence reduced to silent worry as Dr. Mitchell performed an ultrasound. "Please," Malene whispered, gripping Richard's hand tightly. "Please, let the baby be okay." After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Mitchell smiled. "The heartbeat is strong," he announced, turning the monitor so they could both see the tiny fluttering on the screen. "What you experienced was likely round ligament pain, uncomfortable but normal as your body adjusts to pregnancy." Relief washed over Malene so intensely she felt lightheaded. Beside her, Richard released a shaky breath, his eyes fixed on the monitor, on the tiny life they had created together. "However," Dr. Mitchell continued, adjusting the ultrasound wand slightly, "I'm noticing something interesting here." He pointed to the screen. "Do you see this?" Malene squinted at the grainy image. "What am I looking for?" Dr. Mitchell's smile widened. "There's baby A," he pointed. "And right here, baby B." The room seemed to tilt. "Baby B," she repeated numbly. "Twins," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. "Fraternal twins by the look of it, both with strong heartbeats." Richard made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. "Twins," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. His eyes met Malene's, bright with emotion. "Two babies," Dr. Mitchell discreetly excused himself, promising to return with prenatal vitamin recommendations and information about managing a twin pregnancy. Alone with Richard, Malene felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Twins?" she whispered. "I never imagined." "Are you afraid?" Richard asked softly, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. "Terrified," she admitted. "One baby was overwhelming enough. But two, how will I manage?" "Not you," he corrected gently. "We. How will we manage?" He took both her hands in his. "Malene, I know this is fast. I know we're still virtually strangers in many ways, but I'm all in. Whatever you need, whatever our children need, I won't let you do this alone." In that moment, looking into his eyes, Malene believed him completely. This wasn't the polished CEO or the charming man from the gala speaking. This was simply Richard, a man who had known profound loss, who understood the value of family, who was offering not just financial support, but true partnership. "I'd like to try," she said finally. "Dating. I mean, getting to know each other, seeing if we can build something real for ourselves and for our children." His smile was like a sunrise breaking through clouds. "I'd like that too." 18 months later, little Thomas chanted, banging his spoon enthusiastically against his high-chair tray. Beside him, his sister Charlotta, named for Richard's grandmother, was methodically arranging her cereal pieces in patterns only she understood. "You've got an admirer," Malene laughed as Richard entered the kitchen of their brownstone, straightening his tie. "The feeling is mutual, buddy," Richard said, dropping a kiss on his son's head before doing the same to his daughter, who gifted him with a solemn smile. The twins had arrived 7 months after that fateful night at Charlotte's restaurant. Healthy, strong, and with distinctly different personalities from day one. Thomas was all Bennett, dark-haired and intense with his father's piercing blue eyes. Charlotta had Malene's golden brown hair and thoughtful disposition. "The Tokyo conference call is at 10 o'clock, Malene reminded him, handing over a travel mug of coffee. "And Jack wants those projections by noon." Richard took the mug gratefully. What would Westfield Financial do without their brilliant finance director? Probably the same thing Bennett Innovations would do without their CEO, she teased back, flounder helplessly. He laughed, pulling her close for a proper kiss. "Dinner tonight, Charlotte's, just the two of us. Mom's taking the twins overnight." Malene confirmed. "It's a date, Brie." As Richard prepared to leave for work, he paused in the doorway, watching Malene wipe Thomas's sticky hands and respond patiently to Charlotta's serious questions about why cereal floats. The sight never failed to fill his heart to bursting. "Hey," he called softly. When she looked up, he said, "I love you, all three of you." Malene's smile, the one reserved just for him, bloomed across her face. "We love you too. Now go run your empire." After he left, Malene helped the twins down from their high chairs. As they toddled into the living room to play, she found herself drawn to the mantelpiece, where a collection of framed photos told the story of their unconventional beginning and the family they'd become. There was the charity gala where they'd first met, captured by a society photographer who had no idea of the significance of that encounter. Richard's grandmother in her garden, a photo Richard treasured, the twins on the day they were born, tiny and perfect, their intimate wedding 6 months ago, with the twins as ring-bearers, wobbling down the aisle with determined concentration. And in the center, in a silver frame that caught the morning light, was the ultrasound image that had started it all, the one she dropped at Richard's feet that fateful day. Beneath it, Richard had placed a small engraved plaque, "The day our family began." Malene touched the frame gently, remembering how terrified she'd been when that image had fluttered to the floor, how certain she'd been that her carefully planned life was over. Instead, it had been just beginning. Behind her, the twins erupted into giggles over something only they understood, the special language of siblings who had shared a womb and would share a lifetime. The sound of their laughter, bright and uninhibited, filled the home she and Richard had created together. Not the life she'd planned, certainly, but as Charlotta toddled over to tug at her hand, demanding her attention for some new discovery, Malene knew with absolute certainty it was infinitely better.